Hello, welcome to the Dialogue Project. This is where we explore two opinions very thoroughly in hopes to find the truth. Today we're doing a specific series called Devil's Advocate.
Devil's advocate is where each person takes a side of a topic, and we have to both argue our side, even if we do not agree on it.
Yes, and today's topic is whether the government should have control over social media as far as censorship. I spun the wheel, and I ended up getting in favor of censorship, and he got against it. Without further ado, let's begin talking. All right, so my opinion is that censorship is necessary for for society, and I'm gonna get into that. Um, Censorship, while it is not ideal, well, a lot of times we think of it in a negative way. Censorship is actually required to have a successful society, and I'm gonna prove that to you. Now, realize what I just said. Censorship is required. I did not say that I did not distinguish the amount of censorship that we put in. My uh, opinion is that censorship is required. Now, whether it should be a lot of censorship, I would actually disagree with that. But there is a level of censorship that we need. And that is what I'm going to get into. That is my opening statement.
My thing is that the government should not have any regulation towards social media. If the government is able to regulate our social media, then we may experience some certain issues that we see in dystopian level movies even. We could see our free speech be taken away, especially here in the US. We see this all across the world. We can see people spreading things that the government believes to be true, even though it isn't. The government can suppress anything that they say against it. It gets rid of both sides of our story. And I'll go more into that a little bit later after we get into it more.
All right, so as I said, censorship is necessary to a successful society. Now, a lot of you might be saying, how could this guy possibly think this? I have two main examples that I'd like to drill in today that proves to you that censorship is necessary in a successful society. Now, again, I want to point out this does not mean I am for a society like a communist government as far as North Korea, where they are inputting every single little thing. No, of course I do not believe that. But I do believe that some sort of censorship, some sort of sense of laws need to be put in place. Otherwise, we may result in a kind of type of anarchy level of society as far as for social media. So, my first example is defamation. Defamation is something, or I will read you the definition right here. Defamation, the action of damaging the good reputation of someone. Now, defamation is actually a law in the United States that prohibits freedom of speech. It exists. A lot of people think that United States freedom of speech is complete, but it's actually not quite. There's a few laws against that, and defamation is one of them. You know, if you're a good person, you're trying to campaign for mayor, and I come and I say terrible things about you, but they're not true, then at some point I need to be held accountable for that. So that is why I believe, yes, there needs to be some sort of censorship on that, but I think that needs to go through a law of court, because if those things I was saying were correct, then obviously I should be allowed to say them. But if I'm saying them just to damage his reputation and there is no basis of that truth, then ultimately that should be covered by the law. And my second point of reason is actually AI. And this is something we're all too familiar with today. And that is AI is considered a form of free speech. But how free should it be? You may have been going across social media platform and you saw something that was crazy. Maybe it was Donald Trump speaking or something, and you felt it was off, right? Well, yeah, it was fake. It was most likely AI. But AI is getting better and better and better, and I think 2 or 3 more years, it'll be hard to tell the difference between a speech made by Donald Trump today and a speech made by Donald Trump on AI. And I think that is going to be a big problem if the government doesn't step in.
Yeah, I'd actually like to jump in on that a little bit. Not the AI part, but the first one.
Okay.
There are laws regulating not only defamation but also harassment and indictment. All three of those can get you up to 5 years in prison or a $250,000 fine.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yeah, totally agree with that. Okay, so now you can get into your
all right,
points.
all right. My first main point of view is that the government should not be allowed to regulate our speech online. For example, if this is what we see in dystopian movies, fictional movies, similar to Fahrenheit 451.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we read that a few years ago. Um, we read about the government banning books rather than regulating social media, which can have some similar parallels. Um, the government is able to determine what they deem to be hate speech, which is what we see a lot online. And if they do not give a clear cut definition, it could very easily lead to just straight up corruption, and anything that they want will go. Um, we see this. We saw this in the Brazilian courts in 2025. They held companies such as Meta, TikTok, and Google and YouTube for problems such as racism, hate speech, and violence. Although issues like this do occur, is it worth getting rid of those? Getting rid of like the little bits and pieces of the bad of
I see.
social media, rather um, versus getting rid of all of free speech, getting rid of every single side of the story. Is it worth that?
Mm-hmm.
This could really lead to a possible revolution, which we saw in Nepal this past year. The young population overthrew the government because of restrictions made um, by the government that ended up banning a lot of social media. Although it's not the same crackdown on speech, it is very similar and can have the same outcomes, which could be an unintended consequence of it. And of course, it gets rid of both sides of the story. If the government bombs, let's say, Mexico for no reason at all, and they want it completely covered up, how would the people in the U.S. be able to know that? We wouldn't be able to, except word of mouth, which can't always be reliable, unfortunately. And just nobody would know. The only people that would know would be outside of the USA, and if the people in the USA hear it, they would just defend their own country, because that's just kind of how we are.
So, I admire your points. I think they're pretty solid. But here's what I have to say. That isn't necessarily against um, the overall censorship. I think you're coming from a point of we do not want government to be over controlling, and I think that's a very good point. But I think that is more of an issue of who we elect and how that's going to go. And I think that that does not necessarily mean that there should not be any censorship. Because, again, if there was no censorship, then there'd be AI videos of uh, subject A saying subject B. And also, there could be tons of defamation of false, illegitimate reports. And then also, I'd like to uh, go on you as far as racism, as far as all those insults. I would actually have to agree that yes, those things are terrible, but as far as freedom of speech, depending on how far it goes, how much are we willing to regulate? And the reason I say that is not because I'm condoning any of that, but because if we give the tools to our government to punish us for those things, there's a very high chance that they misuse it and they start doing it for other reasons than those. So I would have to agree with you on that. But I still think that censorship is necessary. I don't think a lot of censorship is necessary, but some is for sure.
Yeah, very good points. Very good points.
Okay.
All right. So I love what you said about defamation. I had that in my notes.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, defamation does already lead to different already leads to legal pursuits.
Yes.
If you
So
will.
so you would be in favor of keeping those.
Yeah, I am
Okay.
for sure in favor of that.
Okay. Okay. So
However,
we agree on that. Yeah.
yeah, we agree on that.
Yeah.
However, if we let the wrong people decide who it is, which could be in office right now, might not be. If we let the wrong people decide it, they can choose what they believe to be defamation.
Okay.
For
Yep.
example, they could use any criticism of them to be used as an example of defamation.
Okay.
So, like, if I went out and said, this is completely for an example. If I went out and said, I do not like JD Vance because I don't think that he is a good person. Let's say he goes after me for that. That is technically you could consider that defamation. However, legally I
Okay.
do
Yeah.
not
So
believe it to be.
so as far as insults, we should probably keep that.
Yeah,
Fine.
insults, constructive
In
criticism.
that case, every liberal's going to jail. Not with Donald Trump. And then it likewise, Donald Trump's going to jail too.
And then everyone's gonna send everybody to jail. And it's just
everyone will be in jail by then. So
yeah, everyone's going to jail. All of you.
Every single one of you.
okay. No, okay, I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Keep on going.
Yeah, so I completely agree with that, but the levels that it can be taken to can be very
Okay.
can be an issue. It can lead to multiple issues.
All right. Yeah. So I would like to say to that is, I do think we're in kind of the same place on that issue. As far as AI, I want to know what your thoughts are on AI because this is going to be a big problem very soon, and it does kind of go under the freedom of speech category, or people have at least been putting it under there. And as far as I know, I haven't taken up too much track, but with Trump administration and stuff, they seem to be keeping it pretty free, which again is fine for this moment because most people can tell. But I think it's gonna become a problem soon.
I think AI could also fall under defamation depending on how good it gets. If I could get an AI video of you doing ridiculous things, that could be defamation or harassment.
Oh yeah, I foresee a future where that's gonna be a struggle. So
Yeah, it could definitely fall under those categories. And I do believe I'm not a big fan of AI. I do think some of the videos are funny. I'll admit that. However, it's becoming a problem, and I think that we should look more into that
okay,
later on.
yeah. All right. So closing statements. I start then, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So my closing statement is, freedom of speech is very important. It is very important to realize that a total freedom of speech could result in many bad things. And like everything, there needs to be regulation. Just like there needs to be a speed limit, there needs to be regulation on free speech because with misuse of it, bad things can happen.
Yep. And my closing statement is the government should not be allowed to regulate social media content because it infringes on our free speech rights. It could possibly lead to a revolt, and it gets rid of any news that we could possibly see going around the world that's important for us to see as citizens.
Okay. Closing thoughts. Okay. So what do we think? We can now put our filters away from the wheel and we can talk about what we learned. I think what I learned for sure is it's not a complete one-side story. I think there'd be a lot of, not to categorize, but I think a lot of rightists would come and say, hey, we need complete free speech, everything. And then you go, well, what about AI? Well, what about defamation? Like, what happens with that? And then maybe they'll go, oh. And then, likewise, I guess most left's probably for freedom of speech. But, if someone comes and says, we need more government regulation, you got to bring up the fact is, hey, there's problems with that too. It's not a win-win situation.
Yeah, I agree. There is parts to both sides that are true. You can't obviously you can't just post anything. Obviously, I didn't mention this, but it has just been brought to my mind right now. But I remember a few years ago, or maybe it was last year. I don't quite remember, but there was a bunch of really explicit AI videos of Taylor Swift going around, and it was very bad. It was really bad, and I don't remember who stepped in, but somebody at a higher power, either at X or the government, they stepped in and said, you cannot do this.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, totally, for sure. We haven't even talked about that. Is like, or we have a little bit, but like, with AI getting better, like, I'm thinking like people just be making President Donald Trump, say whatever he wants. Which, I mean, let's be honest, that can be hard to distinguish because Trump has said some wild things, but then all of a sudden people are gonna be like holding against that against, and then you're like, well, that's not true. And then how are we gonna know what's actually true? It could just lead to a lot of things. So I think it's very important that legislation eventually finds its way into AI. As for right now, we're probably all right, but uh, you know, it's important to think about.
Yep.
Well, that was a good debate,
it was.
sir. Uh, Thank you for watching the Dialogue Project. I hope you found that this showed both sides and that.
I don't even know if you can hear that. I don't even know if
I
you guys
bet
can hear
I bet you can. All right. Thank you for watching.
Goodbye.